Good morning and welcome to the 2026 Excellence in Masonry Awards, presented by the Wisconsin Masonry Alliance. The awards presented will recognize the craftsmanship, creativity, and construction demonstrated by the winners in the following categories: concrete masonry, clay masonry, natural stone masonry, residential masonry, excellence in craftsmanship, and our Best of Show winner. The judging panel this year included Chris Root with CR Design, Joseph Clark with the Imagination Studio, and Nicholas Mather from Deep River Partners. And now, on to our Excellence in Masonry Awards. The first Excellence in Masonry Award acknowledges distinction in the concrete masonry category. The award goes to Gadorzi for the Nicolay National Bank project in Eagle River, Wisconsin. The general contractor and masonry contractor was Myron Construction. The masonry supplier was Northfield Block, Old Castle, and Spec Mix. Please come to the stage to accept your reward.
The entire exterior of the project is cast stone masonry, a combination of a chiseled face cast stone and a smooth face. My name is Thomas Mejia. I'm a project manager with our self-performed masonry group. The Nicolay National Bank project was a great masonry job, a nice cast stone veneer with a great bond pattern. Very exciting, very beautiful project.
It's got an understated elegance to it. It isn't trying to be flashy. It's very simple in its approach, but it's well proportioned. It uses materials in a really nice combination. The color palette is very subdued, but not boring. And even the integration of the roof color, it all ties together into a very uniform and pleasing overall aesthetic.
You know, this is a bank. People are expecting strength and security, and I think the use of this particular stone really does provide that emotional impact for the user. I particularly enjoyed how they broke down the facade into multiple levels of really complementary masonry. You know, we've got this really textured castle-like feel at the base where it's meeting the ground, and then it smoothens out into this tile block as it goes up, and then it breaks down into this consistent datum line that even transcends into and through the windows, which was a really effective technique.
There was enough time and attention spent to the choice of smooth and rusticated masonry and how it was put together in horizontal bands that tied the entire building together and gave it a more of a visual interest that you wouldn't have if you just used a smooth face or even a rusticated face of block throughout the entire project. So it relied on textures as opposed to color to differentiate and provide a facade that gave a more robust experience.
Masonry, by its nature, is very timeless and it's authentic. It comes straight from the earth. It's kind of an homage to humanity working in the earth and working the soil. I think the most authentic and timeless building material that can possibly be used.
Congratulations to Gadorzi. The next Excellence in Masonry Award acknowledges distinction in the clay masonry category. The award goes to HGA Architects for the Fitz Apartments project in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The general contractor was Catalyst Construction. The masonry contractor was TVJ Masonry. The masonry supplier was County Materials Corporation and Spec Mix.
All the buildings in the surrounding historic district are done out of brick masonry, and so it was an obvious choice for me. I'm Jim Shields, an architect with HGA in Milwaukee, and this is the Fitz apartment building here on the east side of Milwaukee on Hackett. The front of the building, that includes the courtyard that I'm standing in here, is all clay brick, fired traditional clay product here.
The material for this project, I think, was a really big part of why we selected this project. It's the same reddish brick blend used throughout, and on such a big building that really could have been oppressive. But the attention to how the materials are put together make a huge difference in how the building reads.
By doing that, they created a fabric or a rhythm on this building that softens it. There's some large facades here, and there's this beautiful courtyard, but down at the human scale, as you're walking down the sidewalk, I think the way that they pushed and pulled the brick into itself really breaks down on the human scale, so you feel comfortable standing next to this building.
The challenge that this project was confronted with to provide a particular number of units on a particular size of a lot, and to still fit in with the height and the massing and proportions of the buildings around it, but to also be a clear element unto itself. So it's got to be a both and scenario. It speaks on its own. It can exist on its own. But on the other hand, it also gives a nod to its neighbors and plays well on the block.
One of the interesting things about the historic district is while all the old buildings use clay brick on the front facade, just around the sides and on the back, they switched to a much cheaper whitish gray brick. So actually, in addition to the clay that we have on the front and in this courtyard, on the sides and back, we switched to a much less expensive concrete brick. And saved some money, but also did a building that's really in keeping with the other buildings in the historic district. One of the other things is clients have stopped cleaning buildings frequently. And brick is a material that looks good without cleaning. You know, it's something that starts to develop a patina rather than looking filthy like so many contemporary materials do. So I think there are a lot of reasons that brick is back, but it really is.
Congratulations to HGA Architects. The next Excellence in Masonry Award acknowledges distinction in the residential masonry category. The award goes to Melby Design for the Wisconsin Manor Project in Middleton, Wisconsin. The general contractor was Hart de Noble. The masonry contractor was Mount Horeb Masonry. The masonry suppliers were United Brick and Fireplace, Fond du Lac Natural Stone, and Lycon Inc.
Given the scale, we wanted to create these little charming moments here and there that kind of pulled the scale down. And using the masonry stone walls that we did and kind of setting some of these lights on top of these caps, we really felt like it captured that ability to take a larger home but make it feel more on a smaller scale and a little more charming. My name is John Melby, and I am the owner of Melby Design. We're here today at the Wisconsin Manor, and we're excited to show you.
There's a lot of different details around this house that are probably difficult to express in drawing form. You can see that there was a good collaboration between the designer and the mason, and there's a level of skill and craftsmanship that's shown throughout this project.
I think that this is an inspirational project, and to see playful compositions with incredibly heavy materials and have it look as if it all just balances out perfectly.
The design of some of these elements was intriguing, but it also required a great deal of skill on the part of the mason to arrange the different color in a meaningful way.
A factor that brought us to using masonry was certainly the client. So they really drove this project with their goals of this feeling really rooted and timeless in this Wisconsin setting. So we felt that the masonry on this project had to be really true and really old world feeling. So that's why we selected the style of stone that we did. That's just how they used to build homes, right? That whole home used to be built out of stone, out of rock, and then it just slowly grew into where we are today. So by kind of, spinning that clock backwards a little bit and trying to create some of these details that make it feel older, timeless is certainly a buzzword right now, but we really wanted to try to do that justice with some of these archways, site walls, and we've even got some stone that looks as if it's eroding and kind of cascading away. And some of those details, again, just put a smile on my face and as well the mason. You know, we worked with a really great mason from Mount Horeb on this project. He was as passionate about those details as we were. You know, they're involved, they're asking questions, they're doing mock-ups, they're doing all these things to try to also add to the value of the project.
It's using the stone in a very traditional way. The color of the stone was, we decided, very well picked. If it had been more uniform, it would have become monolithic and not had the same character. The pops of color in the stone really tie all of the different design elements, the roof and the accent pieces, together.
So it separates the mason from the artist, you know, so it elevates that to that next level of skill sets that's required, not only knowing how to put the material together, but also having that aesthetic eye as to how those materials are going to blend together adequately.
Congratulations to Melby Design. The next Excellence in Masonry Award acknowledges distinction in the Natural Stone Masonry category. The award goes to Architectural Design Consultants Incorporated for the Village of Windsor Municipal Building in Windsor, Wisconsin. The general contractor was Moss Brothers Construction Company. The masonry contractor was Walsh Masonry Incorporated. The masonry suppliers were Hallquist Stone, County Materials Corporation, and Spec Mix.
This is the Village of Windsor Municipal Building. It houses the administrative offices, some expansion space for their future departments and needs, community center, and their village board chamber. So I'm Dave Cameron. I'm a senior project architect with Architectural Design Consultants in Lake Belton, Wisconsin.
What stood out to me most about this project was the use of multiple stone veneers on the facade. And what I liked about that, it helped break down the mass of this building. You know, it's a municipal building. I think people want to be welcomed into this building.
It has a really nice pedestrian scale. They have elements that work along the street front so that it's more friendly and inviting.
It remained exciting no matter what side of the building you were looking at it or what portion of the building you looked at as you walked down the facade. The attention to detail in terms of where the masonry ended and the next color masonry started was thought out.
The horizontal banding was a big part of it, as well as kind of repeating patterns of the windows so that your eye kind of reads the building horizontally as opposed to vertically is a key factor. We also used some detailing, as you'll see, like around the windows, where we did some arches and some manufactured stone above the windows so that on the exterior the windows are in scale with the building, but on the interior the windows are in scale with the ceilings and the floor-to-floor heights that we needed to work with there. From the initial design meetings we had with the municipality and their building committee, they wanted to establish a presence here that was very permanent, but also fit within the context of the residential. There's residential on three sides, the parks that they've recently been working on, the pedestrian flow, and the masonry and the materials that we picked there were in response to their desire for long-term, durable, permanent materials. When you hear those kind of comments or requests from an owner, your mind immediately goes to masonry. The masonry material itself is timeless. What seems to be more contemporary or traditional in its use is its cut, its application, how it's detailed out. But masonry, especially stone masonry, can speak to each era very specifically that way. And that's one of the other reasons that we really appreciated working with Walsh Masonry is they really took the time to understand what the design intent was. We're very fortunate to have had them on the project. They were very good about building mock-up areas to have us review and talk through the details. And I think all of us were very, very pleased with the end result because their attention to detail and their craftsmanship.
Congratulations to Architectural Design Consultants Incorporated. The next Excellence in Masonry Award honors the late Dennis Wilikowski, who dedicated much of his life to the masonry industry. This year's Dennis Wilikowski Craftsmanship Award goes to TVJ Masonry and HGA Architects for the Fitz Apartments project in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The general contractor was Catalyst Construction. The masonry supplier was County Materials Corporation and Spec Mix.
You know, I'll have to be honest, I didn't lay any bricks here. I just drew them. So that award goes to the craftsmen and women who were laying this building up and did such a fine job. I think there were a couple of circumstances in which the lead mason on the project asked me to come out, and they were just wondering on some piers, narrower piers on the street here, there were several ways they could lay the bricks. These are also unusual bricks in that I wanted something slightly contemporary about the quality of the brickwork. So even though these bricks are the same height courses as old-fashioned bricks in the neighborhood, the bricks are twice as long. So they're actually 16 inches long rather than the old 8. When you're working with the longer bricks, there are some challenges. So they asked how I wanted them to lay up those bricks at those piers. And we worked together on that, and they were just great to work with. You know, most buildings today, they'll have one window treatment in an apartment building on the first floor, then they'll repeat that on the second, third, and fourth floor. One of the things I wanted to do was have a richer surface to the facades than that. And so there's one treatment on the first floor. You can see behind me it involves these 3 bricks out and 1 brick back, which are called rustications traditionally. And then the brick is relatively flat on the second and third floor, as you might be able to see behind me. But for example, all the windows have a 16-inch soldier course where the bricks are turned vertically over the heads of the windows. And that gives it a special texture and character. And then on the top story, there's actually what's called a diapered pattern, actually a diagonal diamond pattern of pulled out 16-inch long bricks. They're pulled out only 3/8 inch, but when the light and shade is right, you can see that pattern really visibly.
You can tell on multiple levels of design, there's a lot of thought and detailing that went into, how to apply this material to this building, and how to use that to tell a story.
That just simple refinement of one material takes the whole building that could have been overly monolithic and gives it layers and character that make it a lot more visually interesting.
It's so critical to accept and understand the qualities of the existing buildings around you and to create a building that at once is of its time, but yet gives a nod to the buildings that have been coming up before it.
Congratulations to TVJ Masonry and HGA Architects. We close this year's Excellence in Masonry Awards by honoring the project selected as Best of Show, an outstanding example of craftsmanship, design, and the enduring artistry of masonry. This year's Best of Show award goes to Melby Design for the Wisconsin Manor Project in Middleton, Wisconsin.
What made this one stand out the best to me in reviewing this and reviewing all the projects, I really broke it down into taking into account the craftsmanship that went into putting this together.
One of the rare occasions where all 3 of the judges actually cited this one as in their top 4 to begin with, for all the same reasons. It just seemed to be the one that had the most attention to detail that warranted it being elevated to high honors in this case.
It's one of those projects that the more you look at it, the more you see, and you want to keep looking further because you're wondering what that next surprise is going to be.
I always say that masonry is 49% the construction side of it, but then you also have that 51%. To me, that's art. Like, this is an art form to be able to come out here and do all these things that make it look seamless and work together to a point where you don't notice it, but then when you really look in and you kind of focus in on these details, then it just starts to kind of speak to you. That immediately set us off on this pathway of archways, curving the stone. In some areas we even took the sill caps away and we're going to let that stone sit. We're going to let it weather. There's certainly maintenance required with some of these details, but that's how you really truly pull that 100-year-old look into a home like this with stone that's going to weather, stone that's going to change over time. And to me, that's the beauty in some of the masonry that you see here. We're We're standing next to a garage here, this 2-car garage, and you can drive around the garage. You can walk around this garage. You can kind of walk up and touch this whole thing, but it has this element of, for a split second, you wonder, was this garage actually here before? Right? So the concept of we're trying to blur the lines of new versus old. We've got another detail on this house where, typically you open up a front door and you'll see landscaping. You will see the front yard, but here you actually see more home. So we're actually giving you a view of your own project from the inside of the front of your home. So you're seeing those masonry details out your front door and creating all these smaller, charming moments that we think are really special. Again, it's kind of that artwork piece of, here's what I think it should look like when we put it on paper, but then when the mason takes it from the paper and they start throwing it up on the walls, it just takes it to a whole nother level. The craftsmanship of masonry is super important, so you want to pair yourself up with someone that feels the same way.
Quite the collaboration between them, and required a lot of skill and craftsmanship and thought to put this thing together.
And there were a lot of really good projects that we looked at. We ended up coming back to this one because everything it did so well. It took on a lot of elements of what's important in masonry, and I think scored at the top of all of our categories for all of those. So not just the overall design, but the craftsmanship, the intentionality of how to use the materials, and then the materials themselves, how they were used, how they were detailed. It all just fit together really nicely.
Congratulations to Melby Design. Thank you to everyone who submitted projects, to all the attendees of this year's awards, and to the teams behind this year's winning entries. Your work continues to elevate the craft of masonry and inspire our industry. Congratulations to all the 2026 Excellence in Masonry Award recipients. We look forward to seeing what you build next.